Good day, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this webinar on the current International Space Station National Laboratory Research Announcement, or NLRA 2025-6, focused on leveraging the ISS National Lab for STEM education and workforce development. I'm Patrick O'Neill, Public Affairs and Outreach Lead for the ISS National Lab. This webinar is designed to help educate those of you who might be interested in submitting a Step 1 concept summary for this specific research announcement. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the ISS National Lab website. Additionally, at the end of this webinar, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. Okay, so let's get a little into the background and history of the ISS National Lab. The Center for the Advancement of Science in Space, or CASIS, is the manager of the ISS National Lab and has served as such since 2011 through a cooperative agreement with NASA. In fact, NASA extended this cooperative agreement for CASIS to manage the ISS National Lab through 2027. Each year, the ISS National Lab puts forth a variety of research announcements focused on targeted areas for researchers, companies, innovators, and educators alike. The purpose of these research announcements is to enable greater access to the ISS, a unique platform in low Earth orbit, to bring scientific value back to people on Earth, build commerce in space, and inspire the next generation of researchers and explorers. And with that, I'd like to bring to the conversation George Booth, STEM Education Specialist for the ISS National Lab. Welcome, George.
Thanks, Patrick. Glad to be here.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the role of STEM education in workforce development at the ISS National Lab?
Well, the ISS National Lab works to shape the next generation of leaders who will step into STEM careers and play a key role in the future space community. We want to advance science literacy in this future workforce by supporting STEM education initiatives and programs that leverage the ISS for industry-related workforce development. We engage the full spectrum of students from grades K through 12 to higher education. Let's start by talking about how an initiative or program can take advantage of this research announcement. In this webinar, we'll provide an overview of this STEM education and workforce development research announcement, discuss the components of a strong proposal, share a couple of project examples, and then highlight the process, timeline, and award information. As Patrick mentioned, we'll then have a Q&A session.
Many of us have heard the term workforce development before, but how does the ISS National Lab define that, and how does it fit into the objectives for this research announcement?
It's a great question, Patrick. For the U.S. to stay competitive in the space industry and keep pace with the projected industry growth, it's essential to train and equip the next generation to not only step into STEM careers, but also become leaders in the space industry. The ISS National Lab regards workforce development as the creation and implementation of programs, training, and skills building that helps develop a world-class STEM workforce to ensure the nation's scientific, technological, and economic leadership. With that definition in mind, we will be looking for projects that encompass the following components: create new or expand education programs, projects, or public-private partnerships with elements that address workforce development. Engage post-secondary students, including colleges, universities, community and junior colleges, and vocational institutions, K-12 students, and/or educators. Include a detailed plan for metrics gathering and analysis. It's important that you clearly state how your project includes each of these components. Take your time. Consider how your initiative or program addresses STEM education and workforce development.
The ISS National Lab has put out multiple STEM education-focused research announcements. George, can you give our webinar attendees examples of a couple of previously awarded projects that might help them begin to plan their own projects?
That's a great idea. I always like to have some examples before I get started on new work. Over the years, there have been some great projects that address STEM education and workforce development. Tomatosphere is an award-winning, curriculum-driven, free program that uses the excitement of space exploration to teach the skills and processes of scientific experimentation and inquiry. First, the Seed Foundation and the ISS National Lab work together to send tomato seeds to the ISS and bring them back to Earth for classroom use. Each classroom receives 2 packages of tomato seeds, one with seeds that have flown in space and one with control seeds that have stayed on Earth. Another great example comes from the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. The Space Medicine Education for STEM Inspiration Project looks to introduce PhD and MD students to space medicine and space-related careers. The curriculum will cover cardiovascular anatomy and physiology during gravitational changes.
Thanks so much for those project examples. I'm sure people are wondering what their first step should be Can you provide some details about this current research announcement?
This research announcement, leveraging the ISS National Lab for STEM education and workforce development, is awarding up to $350,000 in total funding with the expectation to grant around 2 awards. Grant funding is available for both ground-based and flight efforts and covers transport and crew time. The performance period for any project should be no longer than 3 years from the date of the award. While matching funds are not a requirement, proposals that contain matching funds may be looked on more favorably. You might be wondering what kind of submission you need to prepare. Do applicants need to write a full proposal at this stage of the process? The short answer is no. The research announcement will follow a 2-step proposal submission process, and only Step 1, concept summaries, are due by March 26th. Before being invited to submit a full proposal, all interested investigators must submit a concept summary for review through our online portal. Concept summaries are just a few pages long and will be reviewed by our internal review team to evaluate the feasibility of concepts and alignment with research announcement objectives. Concept summaries will be received and reviewed on a rolling basis through the Step 1 submission window. Applicants whose concepts are approved in Step 1 will be invited to submit a full proposal for Step 2. Applicants not invited to Step 2 will receive feedback. The criteria for selection will primarily focus on STEM education and workforce development, implementation and feasibility, flight operations, and the utilization of the ISS. More information on selection criteria and the evaluation process can be found in the documents available on the research announcement webpage. I'd like to pause here for a second and talk a bit about implementation partners. Implementation partners are only needed for projects that have a spaceflight component. Implementation partners are organizations that have expertise in translating proposed work for the ISS environment. It's important to connect with an implementation partner during your Step 1 concept summary preparation. I encourage you to visit our implementation partner database and begin engaging in conversations with these organizations early. There's additional information about implementation partners, as well as available hardware on station, in the solicitation documents. For those applicants who are ready to download the documents and begin working on their concept summary, all of this information is on the research announcement page. We at the ISS National Lab understand that this application process might be a bit daunting for some, so we've put together some guidance and some other helpful information that you can use to prepare your Step 1 concept summary submission. When putting together a proposal, make sure to use the available resources, which you can find links to on the research solicitation page. Everything we've covered so far regarding this research announcement is detailed in the downloadable documents and instructions available on the webpage. In fact, there's more detail in those documents than what we're sharing with you now. If your project includes a spaceflight component, connect with an implementation partner early. The scope of work and budget that you receive from your selected implementation partner is critical. Write to the evaluation criteria. The instructions outline the evaluation criteria that will be used to evaluate your Step 1 concept summary. Address all the evaluation criteria. Proposals that do not address all of the criteria or address them poorly are very likely to receive low evaluation ratings. Lastly, submit a compliant concept. Ensure that your research objectives are within the scope of the specific research announcement. It's important to read through the solicitation instructions and reach out if you have questions. Let's take a final look at the announcement timeline. The full schedule for submission, review, and selection can be found on this chart. We are now accepting Step 1 concept summaries, and these are due by March 26th. Full proposals, which are by invitation only, are due June 2nd. Proposals will go through a review process, and projects will be selected in September 2025. We have solicitations in other research areas throughout the year, but this one will be the only time in 2025 that we are accepting STEM education and workforce development proposals. Now you have all the information you need to get started on your concept summary submission. Check out the research announcement online and start preparing your Step 1 concept summary. Remember, we're just an email away.
To our audience, remember that the goal of ISS National Lab activities is to bring value and impact back to the U.S. economy and taxpayers by benefiting life here on Earth. Well, that was an outstanding review of this STEM education and workforce development research announcement that's open now and ready for applicants. Thanks, George.
It's been a pleasure. This has been a great opportunity to take advantage of the expertise and access to space available to you through the ISS National Lab. What's up next, Patrick?
Well, it's time to take some questions from you, our webinar attendees. Thanks for attending and stay tuned. While the team is getting ready to answer your questions, I'm going to take a minute to talk about the International Space Station Research and Development Conference, or ISSRDC, an annual event hosted by the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space, which manages the ISS National Lab, together with NASA and the American Astronautical Society. This year, our 14th ISSRDC will be held in Seattle, July 28th through the 31st, and will include dynamic keynote speakers, plenary and technical sessions, lightning talks, workshops, and plenty of opportunities to network with leaders in the space community. Registration will open in a few months, so mark your calendars now, and we hope to see you in Seattle.